Hello, and thank you for joining me for this second criminology session brought to you by e-sgol. My name is Mr. A. Marek Jones, criminology teacher for e-sgol. Now, in the first presentation, we looked at 3.1, which is the limitations facing agencies when trying to ensure social control. In other words, when they are trying to look at our behavior and make us conform to the laws, how do they act? What are the limitations facing them when doing this? Now, in this particular session, the next one, I'll be looking at the effectiveness of agencies in achieving social control. In other words, when it comes to controlling our behavior, making sure that we stick to the law, how effective are they in doing this job? Are there instances, for example, where they are not effective? Are there instances where they've fallen short of society's expectations of them? Now, we will look at different agencies, starting off with the police. Now, of course, you've looked at the police in various aspects of your work up to now, so you know a lot about the very important work they do. They do work in preventing crime, keeping members of the public safe, tackling antisocial behavior, and they basically work towards the decreasing amount of crimes that happen in society. Now, they can issue warnings, order people to refrain from antisocial behavior, arrest people, and take them before the court, working with the CPS. Many strengths. Now, of course, this is very difficult work, which they do under very, very difficult circumstances, and that not very often are the police commended, or in fact receive the due attention that they deserve for the work they do. Historically, when they do make mistakes, they appear in the press. They're the type of institution where the mistakes happen, mistakes are big, they're newsworthy, and they happen. Very less attention is given to when the police actually do their work well. For example, if I told you that September 24th is the Police Memorial Day, how many of you would actually know that? This is a day where the police remember those who have fallen in the line of duty, who have given their lives to protect the public, or in fact been injured and quite severely in many cases while in the process of implementing their duties. Now, their motto, make sure I get this right, is facta non verba, which is deeds, not words. And that probably sums up the work that the police do under very difficult circumstances. Now, they have specific, as the last bullet point shows, specific parts of the police to deal with specific crimes. You've got anti-terrorism, robbery unit, fraud unit, the personal protection unit. So they actually specialize in various departments and various crimes. So the work they do is very important, and it's not often that we hear about the successes of the police, but it's very often we hear about the problems they encounter when it comes to their effectiveness. So remember, in this question, it's asking you to evaluate the effectiveness of different agencies. So when it comes to the police, of course, there are many strengths, and you would have come through or mentioned these or come across these as you've done the work up to this unit, which is 3.4. However, because we're assessing and evaluating effectiveness, we need to look at areas where the police perhaps have fallen short of what is expected of them. And you can bring in examples. Now, you can bring any examples you want, because you would have covered a lot of this when you did your coursework. The last two elements of the Unit 3 coursework were you looking at specific cases and specific crimes and specific instances where there were miscarriages of justice, or perhaps there were overzealousness in the implementation of criminal proceedings against people. No, so you might have come across the murder of Stephen Lawrence, who was killed in 1993. Now, this was important because a litany of police failings came to light. They failed to collect all the evidence available. There were accusations that members of the police had conspired with members of the family in order to make sure that the individuals charged, which you can see on the screen, were found to be not guilty in the end, or where the police failed to charge them. ICT equipment that the police used were not fit for purpose. Police conducted very superficial interviews with the individuals who were accused of this murder, and only 7 questions were asked relating to the murder during those actual interviews with the accused. So during this murder inquiry, police were heavily criticised and were criticised for being ineffective, that they didn't take it seriously. Now, this led to the 1999 McPherson report, which was really, really critical of the police, accused them of institutional racism, that they had come to this crime with the view that these white men could not possibly be guilty, and that Stephen Lawrence must have been up to some kind of no good. So no, it's very easy here just to drone on a page and a half about the actual murder itself, but don't do that, okay? The question is how effective. You just bring in some example to show when the police were questioned about their effectiveness. There's no need to say the entire story, okay? When these questions come up, they're usually 5, 6, or 9 point questions. So you won't have much time to write the story about what happens. Just bring instances, bring examples of when police effectiveness was called into question. Now, you've got another example here, and this example appears in your textbook, and your textbooks, really, and your teachers would have drawn your attention to it. Police were also criticised in 2014 when this gentleman here, John Lowe, who was 82 years old at the time, committed murder of his family members, Christine Lee and Lucy Lee, shot them in their house. Now, the reason the police were criticised was that John Lowe was in possession of shotguns, and the police took the shotguns away from John Lowe because of worries, concerns by his family that he would use these weapons for no good. The police took the weapons away and gave it back to him. And it was on receiving the guns back from the police that John Lowe committed these murders. So again, questions were asked as to whether the police actually did what they were supposed to do, or whether they were ineffective in gun control in this issue. Even John's own daughter, who survived that day, said John Lowe pulled the trigger, but it was the Surrey police that put the gun in his hands. So clearly there's an example here of police ineffectiveness when dealing with this particular issue. But this is 2014, so it's 10 years ago. McPherson report is in the 90s, so these examples are quite historical. But you've also got in your textbook, again, in the historical 2017, the events in Cromer, when the small seaside town was set upon, really, by 100 travellers who came to Cromer and indulged themselves in illegal behaviour, aggressive behaviour, going into restaurants, cafes, pubs, and buying or ordering food, ordering drinks, and then refusing to pay and leaving. Shops were robbed, petrol stations were robbed, and through the entire incident, not a single police came to respond to the events. Now, this was described by the people of Cromer as a criminal dereliction of duty on behalf of the police. So this, again, is another example of police effectiveness being questioned. Okay. Now, more recently, you've got the example of two police officers. On the left, you see PC Wayne Cousins, and if you remember, PC Wayne Cousins was convicted of murder. He murdered Sarah Everard during the COVID lockdown. He'd abducted her and murdered her, and he was a serving Metropolitan policeman. Now, of course, he's going to get a lot of airtime because of what he is, the position he's in at the moment. And the other gentleman, so use that word sparingly, on the right is PC David Carrick, who was convicted of 26 rapes, 49 assaults. He again was an active police constable, and he was using Badoo and Tinder, I think it was Tinder, to meet these vulnerable women and attack them. Now, these two serving police officers, of course, gave the Metropolitan Police a bad name. And it's clear, of course, that when these events happen, when these individual policemen misbehave, the conduct of the police is brought into question. Not only the police conduct and the way they are recruited, how did these two men get past the recruitment and become police officers? And not only that, but to continue to break the law, to attack women, to behave in a fashion that was unbecoming of their uniform as serving police officers. Now, of course, as I've just mentioned before, they're policemen. When police make a mistake, it tends to be a massive media attention is given to it. In reality, it becomes a moral panic, doesn't it? That the police cannot be trusted. The police are not somebody to call if you're in trouble, and it's creating a lot of problems. Now, those are just a few examples of when the effectiveness of the police is called into questions, but you'll have many more. When you've done your coursework, in the last 2 units of your coursework, I think it's 3.1 and 3.2, you will be you'll be discussing things like the Hillsborough tragedy and the failures of the police in the Hillsborough investigation. You'll be looking at things like the Jill Dando murder and how the police actively pursued Barry George when he was a bit of a, Walter Mitty type character, saying he was James Bond and saying he was an SAS officer when he clearly wasn't. So why Jeremy Bamber, another one, Colin Stagg, when they actively pursued Colin Stagg when he was not guilty of any crime. So that you'll have many examples in your work, within coursework, of when the effectiveness of the police was called into question, because there is a link between Unit 3 coursework and Unit 4, the exam. Okay, they're not separate entities; they do feed into each other. So the effectiveness of the police can also be questioned with the fact that 48% of police cases end without arresting a single person. Now that is used as a battering ram against the police, really, but it really is quite high, 48%, considering the legal loopholes and the evidence test that you need in order to ensure a conviction. And in specific cases, for example, as you see in the screen here, in criminal damage or deliberate fires, arson, then 38% of cases were closed without an arrest being made. So again, you can call into the question the effectiveness of the police in this respect, but then again, you could also call into question the effectiveness of scenes of crime officers, forensic scientists, expert witnesses when it comes to this. It's not just the police. Okay. Now, I've got another issue, which is the material you did in Unit 1 when it came to coursework, where you looked at how crime figures are collected. Now, according to the British Crime Survey in England and Wales, right, the crime is down 7%. Okay, but according to the ONS, Office of National Statistics, crime is up 10%. So if you're looking at the effectiveness of the police, sometimes it's not really that easy to look at it because of the data available. It can be interpreted in both ways. The British Crime Survey in Wales says crime is down 7%. That might indicate to you that the police are doing a damn fine job because people are not breaking the law. So crime is down 10%, right? And again, the ONS says crime is up 10%. Well, that may be also an indication that the police are doing a damn good job because, they're catching 10% more than they were before. Okay, so it's very difficult to say what the statistics tell you about this, the effectiveness of the police. Okay, but this question is asking you to evaluate the effectiveness of the police. My overall judgment on that would be that they are an effective a force, but I would say that because my son's a policeman. Okay, but they're an effective force. But when they have difficulties, when problems arise, when there are issues with the way they go about their work, it gets headline news. And unfortunately, it'll be a weekly thing because it's such a large police force in England and Wales. There will be mistakes, and unfortunately, very much like many professions, when it comes to doctors, nurses, teachers, fire brigade, even now television, when those mistakes happen, they tend to get headline news. Okay. So that's the police for you. Now, another agency, of course, responsible for social control is the Crown Prosecution Service, and you've done in your coursework quite a bit of work on the Crown Prosecution Service, so you know that they can be a very effective body, and the things they do is is as wide as it is varied. They look after victims, they prepare court cases well, they look after people who have suffered as a result of perhaps seeing a crime or being part of being an eyewitness or part of it. They prepare court cases, they look at the evidential test, they look at the public interest test, they do the threshold test. You would have known about all of these. These are all strengths, okay? They work 24/7, okay? 365 days a year through the CPS Direct. So they're there to help the police from the moment the police present a criminal act to them. They help direct the police, tell them what path to take when collecting evidence, when questioning people. So they do quite a bit, okay? And they try and do that separately. They try to devolve their work from the police. They're supposed to be an independent body, and they're supposed to look at the interests of the public as well as the police. So you would have done a lot of work on this already, okay? The relative strengths of the Crown Prosecution Service, and of course we have done as well in the last lesson. We did the limitations facing not only the Crown Prosecution Service but the police and the judiciary and the prison service as well. So you could argue the entire debate about efficiency, how effective that needs to be put on the context of the limitations that they faced, and we've seen those in 3.2, the limitation faced. So, you could say, well, given the lack of money, funding, and investment over the last 10 years, it's a wonder the police are as effective as they are, and it's a wonder that Crown Prosecution are as effective as they are, given that they've lost such a massive amount of personnel over the year. So I'm assessing effectiveness. But of course, very similar to the police, when mistakes are made, when the problems arise, they do tend to get headline news. So they've had major financial issues, as this slide says. Some have criticised it for being too centralised, too bureaucratic, while others claim they're far too close to the police. Now, on the right-hand side, particular cases that you can refer to is the case of Abu Hamza, who was an extreme Muslim cleric, who was involved in hate speech, but the CPS were questioned in the fact that he refused to prosecute him. They were afraid that this would infringe on his human rights, and this in turn led people to question, well, what is the CPS for? If you're not prosecuting a person like this for hate crimes, what are you doing? Okay, so they were criticised for that. He was finally sent abroad. Damilolo Taylor, a case you can mention again. It's important not to write stories here. Right? It's just why was the CPS criticised for the Damilolo Taylor case? Well, Damilolo Taylor was murdered, and some of you will have written about this in your coursework in Peckham in November 2000, and the CPS made a complete mess of the investigation. Okay, failure to collect proper evidence, to process it properly, to speak to the relative to the proper people, to direct the police in the right direction, and in the end, the people accused of his murder, who were 12 and 13 years old at the time, I won't mention their name, received a sentence of manslaughter, but heavily criticised for being ineffective in the way they went about their work. On the bottom left here, you've got Lord Jenner, who was accused of indecency and sexual behaviour with minors. Now, because he was a lord, the CPS were accused here of looking after their own. They first of all decided to prosecute him, then decided not to prosecute him. They relied on unreliable witnesses. One of the witnesses the CPS wanted to call had been charged with just possession of child porn himself. So he wasn't a very reliable witness. And you've done that in your coursework. What is a reliable witness and what is a non-reliable witness? Well, clearly he ticks the box for being a non-reliable witness, but still the CPS were going to call him. So in the end, the decision was made not to prosecute Lord Jenner because he was allegedly suffering from Alzheimer's disease. And this turned to be quite an issue that the CPS was criticised for. Okay, now CPS has been criticised for other things, and you see on the far right of your screen the letters that they've sent, full of factual errors, full of misspelling. They got people's names wrong. Okay, so it's poor literacy skills basically. So it's been an issue. There's also a picture of Ant McPartlin there. I better explain why he's there. Well, I think it's a criticism that the CPS didn't throw the book at him, basically. Right? He got caught drink driving, and he was fined £85,000, which is a lot for you and me, but for him it was 5 seconds on Britain's Got Talent. So the complaints of the CPS didn't go far enough, didn't ask for the maximum sentence, although they don't decide the sentence. It's a judge that decides the sentence, but the accusation was that the CPS didn't push hard enough to make a case out of Ant McPartlin, again questioning their effectiveness. Two funny things, I suppose, but not in a way funny, but you got the case of Paul Chambers here. Paul Chambers went into an airport and he was quite agitated, and he said to one of the attendants behind the desk, "You better sort your shit out now. I'm going to blow this airport up." Now the CPS decided, right, we're going to prosecute him, and you've got a question there, whether that was the right thing to do. Okay, because clearly he wasn't going to blow the airport up, and when it came to court, the judge threw it out straight away. So that was a vast waste of taxpayers' money for no reason. Again, John Higgins was prosecuted by the CPS for selling a goldfish to a minor. Now, again, you've got to ask whether this is a good spend of public money to prosecute a person for that particular issue. Okay, so you'll have plenty of examples you look at your coursework, look at the 3.2 or 3.3, I think it is, where you looked at miscarriages of justice, where you looked at police collection of evidence and the problems with that, with what happened there. You've got examples of the issues as well, where the CPS probably should not have carried on with a prosecution. So their effectiveness is called into question. Now, evaluating or do I think is there an effective body? Yes. Most cases that go through court, they're not subject to appeal. Most people accept their sentences. So in this case, I think they're pretty effective. But then again, when they do mistakes, it's cannon fodder for the media. Okay, so it's a no-win situation for them when they make mistakes. Next, you've got the judiciary. Again, I won't read what's on the screen. You can pause the video and read that at your convenience without me just parroting my way through it. But the judiciary often do things right. Okay, the rule of law in Wales and England has been a given for centuries. Okay, it's something that has a lot of respect. It's something that people believe in. Okay. Now, even though we do have a jury system, which you by the fact that you've done your course, you might actually be questioning whether that is actually is the right way of doing things. 12 people chosen randomly to listen to a complicated fraud case, but it is a system that has proven effective over time, and people do believe in it. There's a high degree of people, high degree of validity to the legal system in Britain. Now, if it is questioned for its effectiveness, it's often questioned for the fact that it's too lenient. As you can see in what you see before you, 141 sentences were extended in 2016, and that tends to be the norm when it comes to criminal cases. They are sentences that are extended because they are deemed to be too lenient. So it's not often that court cases are changed because they're too harsh. Okay, Again, another complaint about the effectiveness of the judiciary is that it's run basically by judges who tend to be too old, don't understand society as it is, and are privately educated, so come basically from the upper classes and don't really understand what's going on. Well, you can see a couple of quotes on the screen there from one of your textbooks about things that judges have said over the years, which have raised eyebrows or question how effective can they be in administering justice when they're just out of touch with what society is like. There's a big push at the moment to have younger people as magistrates in magistrates' courts. So that is something that the government is pushing at the moment, and you can actually go on our website and put your claim in to be a young magistrate if you want. There's a couple of magistrates in England, in Wales and England, that are 21 and 24. So have a look at that if you're interested. So another complaint, of course, is that it's not diverse enough. It's not really an effective body because it doesn't represent everybody in Wales and England. 29% of judges are female. 7% come from ethnic minorities. So that again draws the question, well, how effective can they be? Do they really understand the problems and the issues facing ethnic minorities, women and women in Wales and England? So it just questions that particular issue. Now, on the plus, when it comes to how effective they are, I've told you that 141 sentences were extended in 2016. Might be worth you Googling how many in 2022-23 to make this more modern than it is now. But there are specific bodies, as you will know from your coursework now, that actually looks at miscarriages of justice. The Criminal Case Review Commission, right, looks at the sentences given, looks at specific cases to see whether the right decision was made, whether it needs to review. Now, that might lead you to the assumption, well, actually, the judiciary is a very effective system because there's a body overseeing what they do. So if they do make what is perceived to be a mistake, it goes to that body, which is the Criminal Case Review Commission, and they will then review decisions made to see whether it was right or not. Now, when it comes to effectiveness, you can't get more effective than having somebody review your work and change it if it's deemed to be too lenient or too harsh. So you could say, in effect, that the judiciary is quite a efficient body because it also polices itself. It polices its own decisions. It questions its own decisions. And you've done in your coursework instances of miscarriages of justice. But they've been identified as miscarriages of justice. So you could argue there, well, it is effective. On the other hand, of course, you could say, well, it's not effective because some of these people spent years and years and years in jail before the miscarriages were found out because of new DNA evidence, etc. So you can actually use this argument either way to say that they're effective or in the end, or that they're not effective. Okay, but they're effective really often stems from the work of other people, the admissions of police or new DNA evidence, etc. So generally, an effective body when it comes to administering justice. But again, when problems arise, when there are miscarriages of justice, it is in the public eye. It becomes obvious. It becomes a newsworthy item, and it does get a lot of attention. Prison. Prison is another agency that we've looked at, and you'll know what prisoners do. Now, even if it comes down, if you look at the aims of punishment, when it comes to revenge, they do a very effective job. I don't know about you, but I hate to be locked up for 24 hours a day in prison. I think the most valuable thing any person has in his life is freedom to do what he wants. You take that away, and it's definitely revenge. It's definitely an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. So in that respect, you could say they're very, very effective. When it comes to rehabilitation, well, that's another matter. Okay, I'll get to that in a minute. When it comes to does it stop people from breaking the law? Okay, is it a deterrent? Well, again, you could argue, yes, it is an effective deterrent because I've just told you I don't want to go to jail. People don't want to go to jail. Okay, so it's an individual deterrent and it's a general deterrent. But then again, you could argue, well, no, it's not actually, because the high rate of people who reoffend. But we'll get to that in a minute. A very effective body in the fact that it has a reward system, a token economy where you have incentives and earned privileges in order to behave. Very few prisoners actually escape. If you remember, in 2023, one prisoner escaped and it was in the news for a week. He hid under a lorry and out he went from the prison, and there was a manhunt for this particular individual for a week. Now that shows you how effective the prison system is, because it doesn't happen that often, and when it did happen, it was on national news for a week. So there must have been a lot happening that week. So they're very effective in keeping people in prison. That's certainly for sure. And they give courses and training and skill up prisoners. And you can't really blame prisons for reoffending rates, because there's more than just prisons involved in rehabilitation. Okay, so that's probably a bit unfair, but we do it, as you see on the slide here. Is it an effective body? Well, you can, when it comes to criminology, one thing you find out, you can find statistics for anything you want, and very often they can very, very, very much differ from each other. Offending rates are very high. The ones I've got here shows maybe different to other things in other textbooks. Offending rates are 59% if you've served less than 12 months in jail. 18% reoffend if you've spent more than 10 years in jail. So it seems to be the more time you spend in jail, the less chance it is of you reoffending. So that might show how effective they are. The more the prison service have you under their control, the less likely you are of reoffending. So you can see the realist argument here about people should spend more time in jail, not less, because the more time they spend in jail, the least likely they are to reoffend, because jails are very effective. Well, okay, that is a debatable argument, but it's one you can do. But you've also got other problems facing jails, of course. Now, historically, you've got the 2016 Mount riot, but there was also riot in Birmingham. There was also Bedford prison riot. So historically, you've got those to fall back on when it comes to how effective are prisons. Drugs and assaults have increased. Okay, now I'll give you the figures now for 2023. Attacks on staff from June 2022 to June 2023 increased by 13%. Assaults on fellow prisoners, prisoner against prisoners, increased 9%. There were 304 deaths between June 2022 and June 2023 in custody. 92 of those were suicides, and that was up 24%. And there were 64,348, according to the official statistics, of self-harming incidents between June 2022 and June 2023. Again, that was up 21%. So you could argue here that it's not really effective at keeping prisoners safe and looking after prisoners' mental health issues. But as I say, when it comes to the aims of justice, deterrence, protecting the public, they do that well, because they're in jail, they can't do any harm. So this is a bit of a mixed one. But again, when it comes to reoffending, I don't think you can blame the prisons solely for this, because preventing people from reoffending is a massive thing. And we looked at that in 3.2 when we looked at the limitations facing prisoners and all the problems they have when they're released. It's not a wonder why so many prisoners or ex-prisoners reoffend, given what happens to them when they're released. Okay, so that's the prison service for you. Again, the probation service, and you've done a lot of work on this. They do a lot of work in society. Okay, they look after about 30,000 offenders, people on license, people who are doing community service. They have to write reports for court cases. They look after people who have been the subject of crime. So there's a lot of things they have to do. Look after people on addiction, treatment, and they meet with offender managers to discuss the progress that prisoners are making, especially those on license or early release. So they do a lot of work in society. And again, remember what we said in the last lesson about the limitations, the budget cuts, the lack of staff. They did do all this work under all that pressure. Now, up until 2020, some of the work was done by community rehabilitation companies. The government took the work of the probation service and handed it to private companies, which was a disaster, basically. Most of them missed their targets. Some of them lost offenders. Some of them lost their paperwork, and in fact, they've been disbanded. And all the community rehabilitation companies' work has now been handed back to the probation service during the last 3 years. Now, understaffed, underfinanced, and they've been given all this work back. It's a wonder that they are so effective, really, in their work, considering what they have to do and what the change that's been in the last 3 years with the way they have to do it. Are they effective? Well, 75% of people in jail have had a community service at some stage. So that could be a reflection on the probation service, but then again, it could be a reflection on the sentences given to individuals just clearly not working. So, according to recent reports, much emphasis is being placed on paperwork. It's bureaucratic. They're not looking after the welfare of prisoners. They've been heavily criticised by the Chief Inspector of Probation Services. Estyn inspects probation service in Wales, and they've been the subject of some criticism over the past few years. And again, as we mentioned in the last bullet point there, the work of the community rehabilitation companies have been nothing less than extremely ineffective. And all that work now has gone back to the probation service itself. So this is a huge issue, okay? Given the work they do, probably very effective as well. But again, when they have problems, when problems arise, they will be in the media spotlight. Very difficult to be critical of charities and pressure groups, of course, because they are charities and pressure groups. Most are volunteers. Because when you're discussing effectiveness, it's easier to discuss the effectiveness of the police, the judiciary, the prison service, because you know what they're supposed to do. You have a fair idea of what they're supposed to do, so you can then judge how effective they are. When it comes to charities and pressure groups, you don't really have that expectation of what they're supposed to do, because anything they do is a help, isn't it? Because they're helping society. They don't have specific aims or what do you expect of them. We just appreciate the fact that they're there. So when it comes to charities like the Prison Reform Trust, when it comes to pressure groups like Unlock, when it comes to the Prince's Trust, I don't think you'll get a question here on how effective they are, because it's very difficult to judge that. But they've been very effective in certain campaigns like Care Not Prison, books for prisoners. And you would have done a lot of this in year 12, where you looked at charities and pressure groups. They work, for example, of the Prince's Trust with 13 to 30-year-olds, keeping them out of jail. Unlock in getting prisoners to have a bank account before they leave prison has been really, really effective in at least trying to get them away from a life of crime. So all the charities and pressure groups involved in social control or in helping society, it's very difficult to judge really how effective they are, because you don't have a bar. You don't have a bar where you expect them to reach. Anything they do really is helpful. However helpful is difficult to judge, really. Okay, so that's the second presentation, and in the next presentation I'll be looking at 3.3 and 3.4 in as much as they appear in the exam papers. Now that's what is important to you. The knowledge I've just imparted you there, you've had from your teachers anyway, perhaps in a different format, different statistics, it's all fine. But what we need to do is to look at exam papers and to see how these particular questions or these particular issues relating to 3.3 and 3.4 actually appear in the exam paper. So if you could join me or listen in on the third presentation there, that would be great. Thank you for listening, and hope you listen to the third presentation now. Thank you very much.